Today's card of the day is Oracle of Mul Daya. 3 and a green for a creature elf shaman with you may play an additional land on each of your turns. Play with the top card of your library revealed. You may play the lands at the top of your library. 2/2. This is one of those creatures that I really wish I'd had a deck for. I don't have one personally, but boy, when I've seen people play this card, usually they're just playing their fetches and all of a sudden, bam, they fetch and bam. Who would have knew? There's another there's another land on top of their library. And they just keep playing lands on top of their library. It's super strong. It's also one of those cards that are like unexpectedly strong, especially in a more casual meta where people aren't too particular about lands, right? Like people will see that you're playing lands on top of your library, but it's not really like, oh, that guy's getting ahead, right? It's just more like, oh, he's just playing lands on top of your library, right? But when that sort of effect keeps racking up, it definitely becomes super scary because I think there was like a stat, I forgot where I saw it, but like people with the most lands end up like winning, right? They have more abilities to do game actions, and with more game actions, usually you can pull ahead that way. This is one of those cards that's just like, yeah, like I'm gonna pull you ahead, and it's hard to interact with this sort of pull ahead too because I mean, if you're playing basics from top of your library, there's not too many ways to destroy the basics that you put onto your battlefield, right? So this pulls you ahead in a matter that is hard to interact with, but also unassuming for people who like to play very like uh, very carefully and that they really like to sandbag their removal for things that are more particularly menacing that aren't like immediately threatening, right? So this is one of those cards that sort of gets around that. I think for the most part, right? Like I played this with this against this card a few times, and every time I see it, people usually just let it stick a few minutes, and I couldn't tell you why. It's the same as something like a I want to say a Risic study. Like the ceiling for that is a little higher. I would say a lot higher. But it's still akin to like a serious card advantage engine. And some people might not like the fact that it sort of lets opponents see what you have coming next. But the problem with that is people sometimes often just like if they know that you have something particularly scary or menacing on top of your library, they'll try to wait for that. And the interesting thing, if you see how this plays, is sometimes people will just like forget other players are in the game, and so you can really tell like what they have in their hand, right? Like they'll keep mana up in a particular way. If you cast this card, they'll behave differently, and I personally think it's really interesting. It feels like a weird social experiment, sort of, where it's like you can really see how people are thinking when you have the top of your deck revealed. Their mannerisms will change. It's all so much very interesting. And I think one of the reasons why I like this card a lot. But of course, this card doesn't go in every deck. I think if you're playing just a low colored green deck, you might want to run this. I don't know if you want to run other cards that are a little cheaper that come out earlier, but if you're definitely more of a controlling deck, this is probably fine. Like this, if this lives for a few turns, I can probably imagine this is going to ramp you like, and at least its mana cost, right? Like this card is pretty nutty in that manner, especially if you're like playing a bunch of fetches and assuming you're playing more of a control deck. This is easily going to be able to like, catch up back in its mana cost, right? It's gonna get you at least mana, pay itself back, and that's why I think this card is like super strong. Um, yeah, it's a really sweet card. I think this card probably goes in anything from mid upward. I don't think I've ever really seen it in a high or a CDH level deck. I think it's just generally too slow. But like in a high power meta, ooh, it can be really good. It can be super nice. Because I don't think people generally play pyroclasm with that effect. And it is 2 power and 2 toughness, so it is a little weak on that end. So for what it's worth, you definitely want a meta where people are definitely a little more grindy. I think it's also pretty good in stacksy metas where like playing lands on top of your library helps you negate the costs slowly but surely of like sphere resistances and effects like that, right? Because you're slowly building up your mana, and this doesn't really care for those effects. So I think it's just a lot to like about this card. I think it's definitely one of those. I wouldn't say sleepers because everyone knows about this card, but it's definitely a super good card. I definitely would suggest you play one of these if you get a chance because it's amazing. It's nothing bad to say about this card. Um, unless you're looking for blockers. If you're looking for blockers, you're probably not gonna look one get the blocker here. But yeah, let me know what y'all think about this card. What decks are you playing this in? It might be a little too slow for like ramp, but if your games are going long, playing a ramp spell at 4 that also just like gains you some ramp throughout the game, I think is like fine as long as you're able to slow the table down enough. But of course, let me know what y'all think about the comments below. Peace out, and I'll catch you guys later.